The photograph trembled in his small hands as 8-year-old Elijah Marshall stood before the judge. 7 foster homes in 8 years had taught him to stay quiet, to bury his memories deep. But he couldn't forget the heartbeat, the lullaby, or the face in the picture he'd guarded with his life. Judge Rebecca Williams was known for handling family court's most brutal cases without flinching. What no one knew was why, how a falsified death certificate and an empty nursery had turned a grieving mother into the law's most relentless guardian. For 15 years, she'd buried her pain beneath her robes. Until today. Until this silent boy with eyes that mirrored her own. Until 4 words shattered her world. "You're my mom." Now a single mother's cry for justice is about to expose decades of elite corruption, tear open a nationwide conspiracy of stolen babies, and bring down a criminal empire that turned infant trafficking into a brutal art. Because behind every forged death certificate is a mother who never stopped searching, and behind every stolen child is a truth waiting to be found. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow's special episode is one you definitely don't want to miss. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Courtroom 307, casting long shadows across the polished wooden floors. Judge Rebecca Williams sat behind her imposing bench, her sharp blue eyes scanning the document before her. At 42, she had earned a reputation as one of the most respected judges in family court, known for her dedication to protecting children from broken homes. Her colleagues often remarked that she approached each case with an almost surgical precision, never letting emotions cloud her judgment. Today's case seemed routine at first glance, another foster placement gone wrong, but something about this one made Rebecca's chest tighten as she reviewed the file. The child's name was Elijah Marshall, 8 years old. His current foster parents, James and Patricia Turner, were filing to relinquish custody after just 4 months. Rebecca's fingers traced the edges of the manila folder, noting how thick it was for someone so young. The courtroom was quieter than usual this morning. Rebecca looked up from the papers, her gaze falling on the small figure seated in the front row. Elijah sat perfectly still, his shoulders hunched forward, eyes fixed on the floor. He wore a navy blue sweater that seemed a size too big, making him appear even smaller than he was. Unlike most children his age who fidgeted or looked around curiously, Elijah remained motionless, as if trying to make himself invisible. "Dear Honor," Patricia Turner's voice cut through the silence. "We've done everything we could, but Elijah is..." She paused, searching for words. Simply too difficult to handle. Rebecca's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. After 15 years on the bench, she had heard every euphemism for giving up on a child. The familiar anger stirred in her stomach, but she kept her voice steady. "Please elaborate, Mrs. Turner." Patricia smoothed her designer skirt, her manicured nails catching the light. The diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist sparkled as she gestured. "He refuses to speak most days. He won't participate in family activities. When we try to include him, he just stares at us with those vacant eyes." James Turner nodded in agreement, his expensive suit rustling as he shifted in his chair. "We have other foster children who are thriving in our home. But Elijah..." He shook his head, adjusting his gold cufflinks. "He's had several outbursts that deeply concerned us." "What kind of outbursts?" Rebecca pressed, noting how Elijah's shoulders tensed at the word. She watched as his small hands clutched something tighter, a piece of paper or photograph, she couldn't quite tell. "He screams in his sleep," Patricia replied, her tone clinical and detached. "Last week we found him hiding in his closet at 3 in the morning, crying and clutching some old photograph. When we tried to help, he became hysterical. He kicked and screamed when James tried to pick him up." Rebecca's gaze returned to Elijah. His small hands were indeed gripping something, a worn, creased photograph that he held like a lifeline. She leaned forward slightly, softening her voice. "Elijah, would you like to tell me how you're feeling about all this?" The boy remained silent, his fingers tightening around the photo. The social worker beside him, Sarah Martinez, touched his shoulder gently. Her kind face showed the strain of too many cases in too little time. "Elijah hasn't spoken in several weeks, Your Honor. The trauma specialist believes it's a response to his experiences in previous placements." Previous placements. Rebecca flipped through the file again, her stomach churning as she counted them. 7 homes in 8 years. Each transfer noted behavioral issues or failure to attach as the reason for placement termination. No mention of his biological parents beyond a brief note. Circumstances of entry into foster care unclear, records incomplete, the morning D. Light shifted, casting Elijah's face in shadow. Rebecca found herself studying his features more intently than she normally would. Something about this case needled at her carefully maintained professional distance. Maybe it was the hollow look in his eyes, or the way the Turners discussed him as if he were a defective appliance they wanted to return. She had presided over hundreds of similar cases, yet this one felt different. Personal somehow. "Mrs. Turner," Rebecca addressed the foster mother, unable to keep a slight edge from her voice. "In your petition, you mention Elijah's refusal to bond with your family. Have you considered that his withdrawal might be a cry for help rather than defiance?" Patricia's perfectly painted lips tightened. A flash of annoyance crossed her face before she schooled her features into a practiced expression of concern. "With all due respect, Your Honor, we're experienced foster parents. We know the difference between a child who needs help and one who simply won't accept it." James Turner cleared his throat, straightening his tie. "We've provided Elijah with everything. Private school, therapy, his own room with all new furniture. We even hired a tutor to help him catch up in school. But he shows no appreciation, no desire to be part of our family." Rebecca suppressed a surge of anger at their materialistic approach to parenting. She was about to respond when something made her pause. Elijah had lifted his head, his dark eyes meeting hers for the first time. The intensity of his gaze struck her like a physical force. There was something hauntingly familiar about those eyes, something that made her heart race unexpectedly. A strange sensation washed over her, a mix of déjà vu and unease. She had seen countless children in her courtroom. Why did this boy's face seem to trigger something deep in her memory? Rebecca pushed the thought aside, reminding herself to maintain professional distance. The Turners' lawyer, William Bradford, stepped forward. His well-tailored suit and confident demeanor spoke of countless victories in family court. "Your Honor, my clients have provided extensive documentation of Elijah's behavioral issues. The night terrors, the selective mutism, the emotional outbursts, all of these make him an unsuitable match for their household." Rebecca's fingers drummed lightly on her desk. "Mr. Bradford, your clients agreed to provide a stable home for a child who has experienced significant trauma. The behaviors you're describing are typical responses to such experiences." "Nevertheless," Bradford continued smoothly, "the Turners have other foster children to consider. Elijah's presence is disrupting the harmony of their household. Surely, you can understand their position?" Rebecca could feel a headache building behind her eyes. She glanced at Sarah Martinez. "Ms. Martinez, what alternative placements are available for Elijah?" The social worker shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Given his history, Your Honor, immediate placement might be difficult. He would likely need to return to the group home temporarily while we search for a new foster family." Rebecca watched Elijah's hands begin to tremble at the mention of the group home. The photograph he clutched crinkled slightly, and she caught a glimpse of its edge, faded, well-worn, as if it had been handled countless times. A detail tugged at her mind, something about the quality of the paper, the particular shade of fading, but she couldn't quite grasp it. "I see." Rebecca tried to focus on the legal aspects of the case, but her eyes kept returning to Elijah. "There," Was something about his presence that tugged at her consciousness, like a word stuck on the tip of her tongue. She found herself studying his features, the curve of his cheek, the set of his jaw, with an intensity that surprised her. The morning wore on as Bradford presented additional documentation. School reports showing Elijah's declining grades. Notes from the Turners' family therapist describing his resistance to attachment. A letter from their pediatrician expressing concern about his emotional state. Through it all, Elijah sat motionless, the photograph his only anchor to the world. Around him, Rebecca noticed small details others might miss. The way his shoes were slightly scuffed, suggesting the Turners' generosity had limits. The uncertain way he glanced at Sarah Martinez whenever someone raised their voice, as if checking whether he was in trouble. The barely perceptible tremor in his hands when James Turner moved suddenly. "Your Honor?" Bradford's voice snapped her back to the present. "Given the circumstances, we request immediate approval of the placement termination." Rebecca straightened in her chair, forcing herself to focus on the legal matter at hand. "Before I make any decisions, I would like to speak with Elijah privately in my chambers." "Your Honor," Patricia Turner interjected, "he won't speak. We've told you." "Nevertheless," Rebecca cut her off firmly, "I would like to try." She began, gathering her papers, preparing to call a recess. That's when it happened. Elijah stood up suddenly, his movement so unexpected that Sarah Martinez grabbed his arm reflexively. The photograph fluttered to the floor, but Elijah didn't seem to notice. He was staring directly at Rebecca, his eyes wide and filled with an emotion she couldn't quite read. When he spoke, his voice was small but clear, carrying easily in the hushed courtroom. "You're my mom." The words hung in the air like suspended crystal, shocking in their clarity and conviction. Rebecca felt the blood drain from her face as the courtroom erupted in murmurs. The Turners exchanged alarmed looks while Sarah Martinez tried to guide Elijah back to his seat, but Elijah stood firm, his eyes never leaving Rebecca's face. "You're my mom," he repeated, stronger this time. "I knew it when I saw you." Rebecca gripped the edge of her bench, her knuckles turning white. The room seemed to spin slightly, as long-buried memories threatened to surface. Memories of a hospital room, of devastating news, of a loss that had shaped the last 8 years of her life. The photograph lay face down on the courtroom floor, its secret still hidden. Patricia Turner's voice cut through the chaos. "Your Honor, clearly this demonstrates his instability. He's delusional. Court is in recess," Rebecca managed to say, her voice barely steady. She rose quickly, gathering her robes around her like armor. "We'll reconvene in 1 hour." As she retreated to her chambers, Rebecca could feel Elijah's gaze, following her. His words echoed in her head, stirring up emotions she had worked so hard to bury. She closed her office door behind her and leaned against it, her professional composure finally cracking. Because the truth was, in that moment when Elijah had first looked at her, she had felt it too. A connection she couldn't explain. A pull she couldn't deny. And now, alone in her chambers, Judge Rebecca Williams faced the most challenging case of her career. One that threatened to unravel everything she thought she knew about her past, her present, and her future. Through the door, she could hear the commotion in the courtroom slowly settling. Sarah Martinez's gentle voice trying to calm Elijah. The Turners' sharp whispers to their lawyer. The shuffle of feet as the bailiff cleared the room. But all Rebecca could focus on was the pounding of her heart and the image of Elijah's eyes. Eyes that seemed to hold both accusation and hope, fear and recognition. She walked to her desk on unsteady legs, sinking into her chair. Her hand automatically reached for the bottom drawer, where she kept a small box of personal items. Inside was a hospital bracelet, a tiny knit cap, and a death certificate, all that remained of the son she had lost 8 years ago. The son she had never even held. The coincidence was impossible. The timing matched, but there had been a death certificate. She had grieved, had rebuilt her life around that loss. Yet Elijah's words had struck something deep within her, awakening doubts she didn't know she had. Rebecca closed her eyes, trying to steady her breathing. In her mind, she saw again the way Elijah had looked at her, not with the desperate pleading of a child seeking any port in a storm, but with the fierce certainty of recognition. She thought of the photograph he had dropped, still lying on her courtroom floor. What secrets did it hold? What truth was hiding in the incomplete records of his early life? The clock on her wall ticked steadily, counting down the minutes until she would have to return to the courtroom, until she would have to face Elijah again, and the possibility that her carefully ordered world was about to shatter. Outside her window, the morning sun continued its journey across the sky, indifferent to the drama unfolding below. But in courtroom 307, a small boy's words had just set in motion a chain of events that would uncover long-buried secrets, expose corruption, and potentially reunite a mother with the child she thought she had lost forever. The photograph still lay where it had fallen, waiting to tell its story. Rebecca's hands trembled as she lifted the fallen photograph from the courtroom floor. The bailiff had cleared the room, leaving her alone with the physical evidence of Elijah's claim. She turned the photo over slowly, her breath catching in her throat. The image showed a younger version of herself, seated in a hospital garden. Her hand rested protectively over her pregnant belly, her face glowing with anticipation. She remembered that day with painful clarity. It was the last photo taken before everything went wrong. "Your Honor?" Sarah Martinez's voice came from the doorway. "Are you all right?" Rebecca quickly composed herself, though her fingers still gripped the photograph. "Come in, Ms. Martinez. Where is Elijah?" "In the children's waiting room with a court assistant." Sarah closed the door behind her. "Judge Williams, I've never seen him speak like that before. In all his placements, he's never claimed to recognize anyone as family." Rebecca sank into her chair, placing the photograph on her desk. "Tell me everything you know about his background." Sarah opened her thick case file. "Elijah entered the system as an infant. The records from that time are incomplete. There's no birth certificate on file, just documentation from the foster agency that first placed him." "Which agency?" Rebecca's voice was sharp. "New Beginnings Family Services." Sarah flipped through more papers. "They closed down 5 years ago after some financial irregularities." Rebecca's mind flashed back 8 years, to the prestigious private hospital where she had given birth. The same hospital that had told her their son was stillborn, that had rushed her into signing papers while she was still groggy from medication. "Ms. Martinez, I need to tell you something." Rebecca's professional facade cracked slightly. 8 years ago I was pregnant. It was a difficult pregnancy, and near the end there were complications. They performed an emergency C-section, and afterward, she paused, the memory still raw. They told me my son hadn't survived. I never even got to see him. Sarah's eyes widened as she made the connection. "The timing matches," she said softly. "Yes," Rebecca stood pacing behind her desk. "But there was a death certificate. I saw it, signed it. How could—" She stopped, remembering something. The nurse. There was a nurse who kept insisting I shouldn't see the body, that it would be too traumatic. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Rebecca's mind raced through possibilities she had never allowed herself to consider. "I need you to do something for me," she said finally. "Find out everything you can about New Beginnings Family Services, and I mean everything. Their leadership, their connections, their funding sources." "Of course." Sarah hesitated. "What about Elijah? The Turners won't take him back. And the group home?" "No." Rebecca's voice was firm. "He's not going back. To the group home. Find him an emergency placement for tonight. Tomorrow morning I'm hiring a private investigator." After Sarah left, Rebecca sank back into her chair, memories flooding back unbidden. She saw herself 8 years younger, walking into Riverside Memorial Hospital with her husband James, both of them so full of hope. James had died 2 years later in a car accident, never knowing the possibility that their son might be alive. The pregnancy had been difficult from the start. Severe morning sickness had left her hospitalized twice, but she had persevered, decorating the nursery, choosing the name Benjamin after her grandfather. Then, at 36 weeks, the complications began. Rebecca closed her eyes, remembering the rush of medical staff, the urgent voices, the sharp fear. She had woken hours later to a nurse with sympathetic eyes telling her the baby hadn't survived. Everything after that was a blur of grief and medication. The sound of her office phone ringing startled her back to the present. It was her clerk, reminding her of afternoon appointments. "Cancel everything," Rebecca ordered. "Family emergency." She spent the next hour making calls, starting with Marcus Chen, the best private investigator she knew. "I need hospital records from Riverside Memorial, 8 years ago. Focus on the maternity ward, especially cases labeled as stillbirths. And I need everything you can find on New Beginnings Family Services." Next, she called her old friend, Laura Thompson, now chief of pediatrics at City General. "Laura, I need a favor. A DNA test, rush basis, completely confidential." "Becca," Laura's voice was concerned. "What's going on?" "I can't explain yet. But I think..." Rebecca's voice caught. "I think my son might be alive." The afternoon passed in a blur of activity. Rebecca arranged for Sarah Martinez to bring Elijah to a private meeting room, away from the formal atmosphere of the courtroom. When he entered, his eyes found her immediately, that same look of recognition making her heart race. "Hello, Elijah," she kept her voice gentle. "Would you like to sit down?" He moved carefully to a chair, still clutching what she now realized was another photograph. "May I see what you're holding?" Slowly, Elijah extended his hand. This photo was older, more worn. It showed Rebecca leaving the hospital, her face drawn with grief. On the back was written, "Your real mom. Don't forget." "Where did you get this?" Rebecca asked softly. "Miss Jenny gave it to me." His voice was barely a whisper. "At my 3rd foster home. She said she used to work at the hospital where I was born. She said they lied to you." Rebecca's hand shook as she placed both photographs, side by side. "Elijah, I need to ask you something very important. Do you remember Miss Jenny's last name?" He shook his head. "She left after giving me the picture. The other foster parents said she got fired." A knock at the door interrupted them. Sarah Martinez entered with a court-appointed child psychologist, Dr. Michael Watson. "Judge Williams, we need to discuss Elijah's temporary placement." Rebecca looked at the boy who might be her son, seeing the fear creep back into his eyes at the word placement. Making a decision that would probably raise eyebrows, she said, "He'll stay with me tonight." "Your Honor," Dr. Watson began, "given the circumstances..." "I'm not speaking as a judge right now." Rebecca's voice held no room for argument. "I'm speaking as someone who needs answers. Ms. Martinez can stay with us to maintain proper protocol, as..." The afternoon turned to evening. Rebecca's home saw more activity than it had in years. Sarah helped Elijah settle into the guest room, while Rebecca spoke with Marcus Chen in her study. "The hospital's records from that period are surprisingly disorganized," Marcus reported. "Several files appear to have been altered or gone missing. But I did find something interesting. New Beginnings Family Services made regular payments to a nurse named Jennifer Kirkland." Rebecca's breath caught. "Can you find her?" "Already working on it. She left the state 5 years ago, around the same time New Beginnings shut down. But people leave trails." After Marcus left, Rebecca found herself standing in the doorway of the guest room watching Elijah sleep. His face was peaceful for the first time since she'd seen him, one hand still clutching the photograph under his pillow. Sarah spoke softly behind her. "I've never seen him relax like this. Usually his first night in a new place is difficult. Rebecca turned to the social worker. I need you to be honest with me. Am I crazy for thinking this is possible? Sarah considered her words carefully. In my 15 years of social work, I've seen a lot of corruption in the system. Private adoption agencies working with hospitals, falsified documents, desperate prospective parents willing to pay anything. It's not as rare as people think. Later that night, after Sarah had settled into the other guest room, Rebecca sat alone in her study. She opened the bottom drawer of her desk, pulling out the small box of baby mementos she had never been able to throw away. The tiny hat never worn, the hospital bracelet that had briefly circled her wrist, and the death certificate that now felt like a lie. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Found something. Hospital security footage from that night was supposedly erased, but I have a contact who might be able to recover it. Call you tomorrow. Rebecca leaned back in her chair, emotions warring inside her. Hope battled with fear, possibility with practicality. If Elijah really was her son, what then? How had this happened? Who was responsible? A small sound made her look up. Elijah stood in the doorway in borrowed pajamas, tears on his face. I had a bad dream, he whispered. Without hesitation, Rebecca opened her arms. He came to her slowly, at first, then all at once, burying his face in her shoulder. As she held him, something deep inside her clicked into place, a recognition that went beyond logic or evidence. It's okay, she murmured, stroking his hair. You're safe now. They stayed like that for a long time, neither speaking. Rebecca found herself humming an old lullaby, one her mother had sung to her. To her surprise, Elijah hummed along. How do you know this song? She asked softly. I remember it, he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. From before. When you used to sing to me, Rebecca's heart stuttered. Before. When I was in your tummy, the nice nurse, Miss Jenny, she told me you used to sing it all the time. He pulled back slightly, looking at her with those familiar eyes. She said they took me away from you, but that someday I'd find you again. Tears slid down Rebecca's cheeks as she held him closer. Outside, the city had grown quiet, but inside her mind, pieces were falling into place. Tomorrow would bring investigations, DNA tests, and difficult questions. But tonight, in this moment, Rebecca knew with a certainty that defied explanation that she was holding her son. Tell me about Miss Jenny, she said gently. Tell me everything you remember. As Elijah began to speak, his voice growing stronger with each word, Rebecca reached for a notepad. Every detail could be important in unraveling what had happened 8 years ago. But more than that, she wanted to know everything about the years she had lost with her son. The night deepened around them as mother and son began the long process of finding their way back to each other. In her study, surrounded by law books and family photos, Rebecca Williams felt the walls she had built around her heart begin to crumble. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The Turners would fight to save their reputation. The hospital would deny everything. Old records would need to be unsealed, witnesses found, truth extracted from years of lies. But for now, Rebecca held her son, listening to his breathing even out as he fell asleep in her arms, and knew that everything in her life had led to this moment. The two photographs lay side by side on her desk, one showing what was lost, the other hinting at what might be found. Between them lay the truth of a story that was only beginning to unfold, a story of loss, corruption, and the unbreakable bond between mother and child. As the first light of dawn began to creep through her study windows, Rebecca made a silent vow. She would uncover the truth, no matter the cost. She would hold accountable everyone who had played a part in stealing her son. And most importantly, she would make sure Elijah never felt unloved or unwanted ever again. The journey ahead would be difficult, but as she looked down at the sleeping child in her arms, Rebecca knew it would be worth every step. Because sometimes, in the midst of life's greatest injustices, miracles could still happen. And sometimes, those miracles came in the form of a small boy with familiar eyes, carrying a worn photograph and 8 years of lost memories. Morning light filtered through unfamiliar curtains as Elijah woke in Rebecca's guest room. For a moment, panic gripped him. Another new place, another strange bed. Then he heard humming from somewhere in the house, that familiar lullaby, and his racing heart steadied. He wasn't alone anymore. Rebecca stood in her kitchen, preparing breakfast with hands that wouldn't quite stop shaking. The DNA test results wouldn't come back for days, but in her heart she already knew the truth. The way Elijah hummed that lullaby, the precise way he scrunched his nose when concentrating, just like her father used to do. She had missed 8 years of these small discoveries. Sarah Martinez arrived early carrying a thick file. "I spent all night going through Elijah's records," she said, accepting a cup of coffee. "There's something you need to see." They spread the documents across Rebecca's dining room table, while Elijah ate breakfast in the kitchen. The earliest records were sparse, just a form stating he had been surrendered to New Beginnings Family Services by an unnamed mother. No birth certificate, no medical history. His first placement was with the Hendersons, Sarah explained, pulling out a weathered report. They kept him for 14 months before returning him to the agency. Said he cried too much, wouldn't sleep. Through the night, Rebecca's jaw tightened. He was an infant. That's normal behavior. The Hendersons were what we call serial fosters. They took in babies, collected the support payments, then returned them when it got difficult. Sarah's voice held barely contained anger. Elijah was 13 months old when they gave him back. The next placement was with a couple named Michael and Karen Davis. They kept him for 8 months before a neighbor reported suspicious bruises. The investigation was inconclusive, but Elijah was removed for his safety. Rebecca read through the police report, her hands clenching into fists. They claimed he fell down the stairs. He was barely walking. "The system failed him," Sarah said softly. Over and over again. A small sound made them both turn. Elijah stood in the doorway, his empty breakfast plate clutched in his hands. His eyes were fixed on the scattered papers, recognition and fear warring on his face. "Those are my bad family papers," he whispered. Rebecca quickly gathered the documents, but Elijah shook his head. "I remember them, the mean ones who locked me in the dark." "Come here, sweetheart." Rebecca opened her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Elijah came to her. "You don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." But something had broken open in Elijah. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush. "The Davis house had a big basement. When I cried, they put me down there. Said the monsters would get me if I made noise." Rebecca held him tighter, meeting Sarah's horrified gaze over his head. This was the most Elijah had spoken in months, but the content broke their hearts. After them was Miss Jenny's house. Elijah continued. "She was nice. She read me stories and never yelled. But then she went away." Sarah consulted her files. Jennifer Kirkland was his foster parent for just under 6 months. She was terminated from the program abruptly, no reason given. "Because she told me about you," Elijah said to Rebecca. "She showed me your picture and said they took me away from you. The next day, different people came and took me to a new house." Rebecca stroked his hair, fighting back tears. "Can you tell us about the other houses?" Elijah's body tensed, but he kept talking. "The Wilsons had lots of kids. They made us fight for food. If you didn't eat fast enough, you didn't eat." The Wilsons' file showed they had fostered 17 children over 3 years before losing their license due to unsafe living conditions. But by then, the damage was done. Then came the Roberts. Elijah's voice got very small. "Mr. Roberts liked to play games." Rebecca felt sick as she read between the lines of the Roberts file. Thomas Roberts was currently serving time for crimes against minors, but not before traumatizing countless foster children. The nice lady at the office said I had to be brave and tell the truth, Elijah whispered. So I did, but then everyone was mad at me. You did exactly the right thing, Rebecca assured him, her voice fierce with protection. You were very brave. Sarah pulled out more recent files. After the Roberts incident, Elijah spent 6 months in a group home before being placed with the Martins. They had a dog, Elijah offered, but they said I scared it by screaming in my sleep, so they sent me away too. The Turners were his 7th placement in 8 years. Each move, each rejection, had left its mark on his young soul. Rebecca thought about Patricia Turner's complaints, his silence, his withdrawal, his failure to bond. How dare they blame him for protecting himself the only way he knew how? A knock at the door made Elijah jump. Sarah went to answer it while Rebecca continued holding him. She returned with Marcus Chen, who carried a laptop and several folders. I found Jennifer Kirkland, Marcus announced without preamble. She's living under a different name in Oregon, and she's willing to talk. Rebecca's heart leaped, but she kept her voice calm for Elijah's sake. What did she say? She wants to meet, in person. Says she has documentation. Papers, photographs, even some recordings she made while working at the hospital. Marcus glanced at Elijah. She says she's been waiting for this day for 8 years, Sarah spoke up. I can take Elijah to his therapy. Appointment while you— No. Elijah's grip on Rebecca tightened. Don't leave me. I won't, Rebecca promised. Never again. She looked at Marcus. Can she come here? She's already on her way. Should be here tomorrow morning. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Dr. Watson, the court-appointed psychologist, came to evaluate Elijah in Rebecca's home environment. To everyone's surprise, Elijah spoke more than he had in months, though he refused to let Rebecca out of his sight. He's displaying clear attachment behaviors, Dr. Watson noted, the kind we rarely see in children with his history of trauma. There's something remarkable about his connection to you, Judge Williams. Late that afternoon, the preliminary DNA test results arrived. Rebecca's hands trembled as she opened the envelope, but before she could read it, Elijah spoke. I already know you're my mom, he said simply. I remember your heart. Rebecca looked at him questioningly. My heart? It's sound. When you used to sing to me before I was born. I always remembered it, even when I didn't know what I was remembering. The test results confirmed what their hearts already knew. Elijah was her son. Rebecca sat down hard, the paper fluttering from her fingers. Sarah caught it, reading quickly. It's a match, she confirmed, tears in her eyes. 99.9% probability of maternity. That evening, after Sarah had gone home and Elijah was asleep upstairs, Rebecca sat in her study with Marcus, planning their next moves. Jennifer Kirkland's testimony will be crucial, Marcus said, but we need more. The hospital will fight this. They can't afford this kind of scandal. What about new beginnings? Rebecca asked. How deep does this go? Deep. Marcus opened his laptop. I've found financial records showing payments from the agency to hospital administrators, nurses, even a few doctors. This wasn't just about Elijah. They were running a systematic operation. Rebecca thought of all the other mothers who might have been told their babies died, all the other children fed into a corrupt system. Her judicial mind began cataloging charges. Fraud, kidnapping, conspiracy. We'll need protection, she said finally. Once this breaks, a lot of powerful people will try to bury it. Already arranged. I have friends in the FBI who are very interested in this case. A small sound from the doorway made them both turn. Elijah stood there in his pajamas, tears on his face. I had another bad dream. Rebecca opened her arms and he ran to her. Over his head she mouthed later to Marcus, who nodded and quietly packed up his files. After Marcus left, Rebecca sat with Elijah in the big armchair in her study. "Want to tell me about your dream? They were trying to take me away again." His voice was muffled against her shoulder. "The mean people." "That's never going to happen," Rebecca promised. "I'm your mom, and I'm also a judge. That means I have special powers to keep you safe." Elijah lifted his head considering this. "Like a superhero?" Rebecca smiled, her heart warming at this glimpse of the child beneath the trauma. "Something like that. And you know what else? You have powers too." "I do?" "Yes. You were brave enough to keep looking for me, even when everyone told you to forget. You kept that picture safe all these years. You never gave up hope." She hugged him closer. "Those are very special powers." They sat together in the quiet study, the moon casting shadows through the windows. Rebecca hummed their lullaby softly, feeling Elijah relax against her. "Tomorrow," she said gently, "someone is coming to visit us. Someone who knew you when you were very little. Miss Jenny." Elijah's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really. She's going to help us make sure no one can ever take you away again. But for now, you need to sleep. Will you stay with me?" The fear crept back into his voice. "Just until I fall asleep?" Rebecca carried him back to his room, tucking him into bed. She sat beside him, stroking his hair and humming their lullaby until his breathing evened out in sleep. Looking down at her son's peaceful face, Rebecca felt a fierce determination take root in her heart. Tomorrow would bring Jennifer Kirkland and her evidence. Soon, they would begin the fight to expose the truth and bring justice to those responsible. But tonight, in this quiet moment, Rebecca simply watched her son sleep and gave thanks for the miracle that had brought him back to her. The years of pain had left their marks on both of them, but together, they could begin to heal. Outside, the city slept, unaware that within its bounds, a story of corruption and stolen children was about to break open. But in Rebecca's home, mother and son had found their way back to each other, guided by love, memory, and a lullaby that had never been forgotten. Jennifer Kirkland arrived at Rebecca's house early the next morning, her silver hair neat but her hands shaking as she clutched a worn leather briefcase. She stopped short when she saw Elijah peek around Rebecca's legs. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "You found each other." Elijah's eyes widened with recognition. "Miss Jenny." His voice was small but clear. Jenny knelt down, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "Look how big you've gotten, sweet boy. I knew you'd find your mama someday." Rebecca ushered them into the living room where Marcus Chen and Sarah Martinez were waiting. Jenny sat on the couch, Elijah choosing to stay close to Rebecca but watching his former foster mother intently. "I've been waiting for this day for 8 years, Jenny began, opening her briefcase. "Gathering evidence, making copies, keeping everything safe. I knew eventually someone would start asking questions." She pulled out a thick folder. "It started small. I was a labor and delivery nurse at Riverside Memorial. We'd occasionally get requests to tell mothers their babies hadn't survived, even though they had. The parents were usually young, poor, or in difficult situations. The hospital said we were helping place unwanted babies with loving families." Rebecca's hand found Elijah's shoulder, steadying them both. "But I wanted my baby. I had a nursery ready." Jenny nodded sadly. "That's when I realized something darker was happening. They weren't just handling unwanted babies, they were stealing wanted ones. The right kind of babies, ones they could place with wealthy families willing to pay anything for a private adoption." Marcus leaned forward. "How many cases are we talking about?" "At least 30 that I documented between 2015 and 2018. Jenny pulled out a USB drive. "I kept records of everything, dates, names, payments. I even managed to secretly record some conversations with the administrators involved." Sarah took rapid notes while Marcus connected the drive to his laptop. Rebecca listened with growing horror as Jenny detailed the operation. Dr. Thomas Wells was the mastermind, Jenny explained. He worked with New Beginnings to identify potential clients, wealthy couples willing to pay 6 figures for a baby. Then they'd watch for matching opportunities. Mothers with the right racial background, health history, and social situation. How did they choose? Rebecca's voice was tight. They looked for mothers who were professional, educated, healthy, but also vulnerable in some way. Single women, women whose partners had died or left, women without strong family support systems, women they could isolate and manipulate. Like me, Rebecca thought, remembering how alone she'd been after James's death early in her pregnancy. Jenny continued, when a suitable baby was born, they'd create a crisis, claim the baby was in distress, rush the mother into emergency surgery. While she was under anesthesia, they'd take the baby. Later, they'd say it was stillborn. But there are protocols, Sarah interjected. Death certificates require... They had people throughout the system, Jenny cut in. Medical examiners who would sign off without seeing bodies, administrators who would backdate paperwork. New Beginnings handled the other end, creating new birth certificates, placing the babies with paying clients, making sure all the documentation looked legitimate. Marcus whistled softly, reviewing files on his laptop. The money trail is incredible. Payments ranging from $200,000 to $500,000 per baby. Elijah, who had been listening quietly, suddenly spoke. Is that why they took me? Because someone paid money? Rebecca pulled him into her lap, her heart breaking at the confusion in his voice. Jenny leaned forward, addressing him directly. No, sweet boy. They took you because bad people wanted to make money. But you were always loved. Your mama wanted you so much. Then why did I keep getting sent away? His question hit them all like a physical blow. Jenny's face darkened. Because the people who bought babies weren't always good parents. When things got difficult, they'd give up. New Beginnings would place the children with foster families, collecting monthly payments for each placement. A secondary revenue stream, Marcus noted grimly. They profited twice from each child. Rebecca thought of the Turners, with their designer clothes and diamond bracelets. Were my son's first parents part of this scheme? Jenny nodded. The Richardsons. They paid $350,000 for him. But when he developed colic, they decided they'd made a mistake. Returned him like defective merchandise. Rebecca's arms tightened around Elijah. That's when he entered the foster system? Yes. I was working part-time as a foster parent, trying to protect as many children as I could. When Elijah came into my care, Jenny's voice broke. I recognized him immediately. I'd been there the day he was born, seen them take him away. I knew I had to tell him the truth, give him that photograph of you. And they found out, Rebecca guessed. Someone must have overheard me telling him about his real mother. The next day, they terminated my foster care license and blacklisted me from working in any hospital in the state. Marcus looked up from his laptop. They tried to discredit you. I'm finding complaints filed against you, allegations of mental instability. Jenny smiled grimly. They couldn't risk me talking, but they didn't know I'd been gathering evidence for years. Every baby they stole, every false death certificate, every illegal payment. I documented all of it. Sarah, who had been reviewing the files, gasped softly. There are other judges on this list, people who helped push through adoptions without proper scrutiny. The corruption goes deep, Jenny confirmed. That's why I had to wait for the right moment, the right person to bring this to. Rebecca stood, moving to her desk where she kept her legal pad. Years of judicial experience kicked in as she began cataloging charges. Kidnapping, fraud, conspiracy, human trafficking, falsifying medical records, perjury. Don't forget RICO, Marcus added. This was an organized criminal enterprise operating across state lines. Elijah watched them all with wide eyes. Are the bad people going to jail? Yes, sweetheart. Rebecca assured him. They're going to jail for a very long time. Jenny reached into her briefcase one last time. There's something else you should see. She pulled out an old envelope yellowed with age. I took these the day Elijah was born, before they could take him away. Rebecca opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, tiny Elijah, red-faced and squalling, moments after birth. You took these? I knew someday his real mother would want to see them. Jenny wiped away tears. He was perfect, Rebecca. 8 pounds, 3 ounces, strong. Lungs, healthy appetite. Everything they told you about complications was a lie. Rebecca stared at the photos, tracing her finger over her son's newborn face. Elijah pressed close, looking at himself as a baby. Was I crying? He asked. You were letting the whole world know you had arrived, Jenny smiled. Just like your mama, strong and determined. Marcus cleared his throat. We need to move carefully from here. Once we start filing charges, they'll try to destroy evidence. Silence witnesses. I have copies of everything in 3 separate secure locations, Jenny assured him. And I'm not the only one who kept records. There are other nurses, other workers who knew what was happening but were afraid to speak up. Once this breaks, they'll come forward. Sarah stood, gathering her files. I'll start reviewing all of New Beginning's past adoptions and foster placements. There could be dozens more stolen children out there. I'll contact my FBI connections, Marcus added. We'll need federal involvement to track down all the players and freeze their assets. Rebecca nodded, her judicial mind already planning strategy, even as she held her son close. We'll need to coordinate with other jurisdictions, set up a task force. These cases will be complex. Multiple charges, multiple defendants, years of evidence to process. What about me? Elijah's small voice brought them all back to the immediate present. Do I have to go back to the Turners? Never, Rebecca said, firmly. You're staying right here with me where you belong. Jenny reached out, squeezing Elijah's hand. You did it, sweet boy. You found your way home. The rest of the day passed in a whirlwind of activity. Marcus left to meet with his FBI contacts, while Sarah began the process of formally transferring Elijah's custody to Rebecca. Jenny stayed, sharing more stories of Elijah's time with her and helping fill in the gaps in his history. That evening, after Jenny had gone to her hotel and Sarah had headed back to her office, Rebecca sat with Elijah, looking through the baby photos. I wish I could have been there, she said softly. I wish I could have held you, sung to you, watched you grow. You can now, Elijah replied with simple wisdom. Miss Jenny says that's what matters. Rebecca kissed the top of his head, breathing in the scent of her son. She's right. And we have so much time to make up for. Later, after Elijah was asleep, Rebecca sat in her study reviewing Jenny's files. The scope of the corruption was staggering. Doctors, nurses, administrators, social workers, judges, all conspiring to steal babies from their mothers and sell them to the highest bidders. Her phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. FBI task force approved. Arrests to begin tomorrow morning. Keep Elijah close. Media will be all over this. Rebecca looked at the latest photo of Elijah on her desk, taken just that afternoon. He was smiling, a real smile that reached his eyes, as Jenny told him stories about his first steps. Next to it sat the photo of him as a newborn, proof of all that had been stolen from them. But they had found each other against impossible odds. Now it was time to make sure justice was served, not just for them, but for every family torn apart by greed and corruption. A soft knock at her study door made her look up. Elijah stood there in his pajamas, his ever-present photograph clutched in his hand. Another bad dream? Rebecca asked gently. He shook his head. No. I just wanted to make sure you were still here. Come here, sweetheart. She opened her arms and he climbed into her lap. I'm not going anywhere. Ever. Promise. I promise. She held him close, humming their lullaby. Tomorrow might be a busy day. There will be lots of people asking questions, taking pictures, wanting to talk to us, but we'll face it together. Elijah nodded against her shoulder. Like superheroes. Exactly like superheroes. Rebecca smiled. And you know what? You're the bravest superhero I know. You never stopped believing, never stopped looking for me. Miss Jenny helped, he said sleepily. She said to keep your picture safe and never forget. We'll never forget her either, Rebecca promised. She helped bring us back together. As Elijah drifted off to sleep in her arms, Rebecca thought about the days ahead. There would be arrests, investigations, trials. The wealthy and powerful would fight back, trying to protect their secrets and their stolen children. But she was no longer just Rebecca Williams, respected family court judge. She was a mother who had found her stolen son, and she would move heaven and earth to protect him and help other families torn apart by this corrupt system. The night deepened around them as Rebecca held her sleeping child, their matching heartbeats a reminder of all they had lost and found again. Tomorrow would bring chaos and challenges, but tonight they were together, safe in the knowledge that their long separation was finally over. Outside her study window, the stars shone bright in the dark sky, witnesses to a mother and child reunited against all odds, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together. The morning news exploded with headlines. FBI raids Riverside Memorial Hospital. Major child trafficking ring uncovered. Judge reunites with stolen son. Rebecca watched the coverage. From her living room, Elijah curled against her side as images of doctors and administrators being led away in handcuffs flashed across the screen. That's Dr. Wells, Elijah whispered, pointing at a gray-haired man shielding his face from cameras. He was mean to Miss Jenny. Marcus Chen sat in the armchair across from them, coordinating with FBI agents via phone. They've arrested 15 people so far, including 5 doctors and 3 hospital administrators. Dr. Wells is singing like a canary, trying to cut a deal. Rebecca stroked Elijah's hair. What's he saying? Everything. Names, dates, bank accounts. The whole operation was even bigger than we thought. They had connections to private adoption agencies in 6 states. Sarah Martinez burst through the front door, clutching a stack of files. You need to see this. We've identified 12 more cases of stolen babies just at Riverside Memorial, all following the same pattern. Rebecca's judicial mind kicked into high gear. We need to set up a dedicated task force. These families will need support, counseling, legal assistance. A knock at the door interrupted her. FBI agent Lisa Taylor stood there, her badge gleaming. Judge Williams? We need to talk. About the Turners. Elijah tensed against Rebecca's side. She pulled him closer. What about them? They're not who they claim to be. Agent Taylor sat down, opening her laptop. James and Patricia Turner don't exist. Their real names are Robert and Mary Sullivan. They've been working with these adoption rings for years, acting as professional foster parents. Sarah flipped through her files frantically. But their credentials, their home studies, all fabricated. They're paid to take in children from questionable adoptions, help cover the paper trail. When families start asking questions or children remember too much, they claim behavioral issues and move them deeper into the system. Rebecca felt sick. How many children? We've identified 27 over the past decade. Some were stolen babies whose adoptive families backed out. Others were legitimate foster children they used as cover for their operation. Agent Taylor's face hardened. They're in custody. Now. Elijah spoke up, his voice small but steady. They knew I remembered things. That's why they locked my door at night. All eyes turned to him. Rebecca's heart clenched. What things did you remember, sweetheart? The hospital, being carried down dark hallways, and he clutched his photograph tighter. Your voice, singing to me before I was born, They got mad when I talked about it. Agent Taylor leaned forward. Elijah, would you be willing to tell us more about the Turners? Anything you remember could help other children. Rebecca felt him trembling. You don't have to do it now, she assured him, and I'll be right here with you when you're ready. Marcus's phone buzzed. The FBI just arrested Judge Harris, he announced. He was signing off on suspicious adoptions, fast-tracking paperwork for new beginnings. Frank Harris? Rebecca's head snapped up. He's been on the family court bench for 20 years, and making millions on the side. Marcus showed them his screen. Offshore accounts, property in the Caymans, wire transfers from shell companies. Sarah stood suddenly. I need to review every case he's handled. How many children did he help traffic? How many families did he tear apart? The day continued in a whirlwind of revelations. More arrests were made. More victims identified. Rebecca's phone rang constantly with calls from other judges, court administrators, and reporters. She ignored them all, focusing on Elijah. By afternoon, he felt ready to talk. Agent Taylor recorded his statement while Rebecca held his hand. He described the Turner's house, the locked doors, the hidden cameras, the strict rules about what children could and couldn't say. They had a special room in the basement, he explained, for kids who talked about their real families. You had to stay there until you learned to be quiet. Rebecca fought back tears as Elijah described the cold concrete floor, the darkness, the sound of other children crying. Agent Taylor's professional demeanor cracked slightly as she took notes. You're very brave, she told him when he finished. You're helping us save other children. After she left, Rebecca held Elijah close. I'm so sorry you went through that alone, but you'll never have to be afraid again. I know. He touched her cheek where tears had fallen. Don't cry, Mommy. We found each other. The word Mommy filled her heart almost to bursting. It was the first time he'd called her that instead of Judge Williams, or just you. Marcus returned from a meeting with federal prosecutors. They're expanding the investigation nationwide. Similar operations have been identified in California, Texas, and Florida. The FBI's setting up a special victims unit just for these cases. Sarah arrived with more files. I've been going through Judge Harris's cases. The pattern is clear. He fast-tracked adoptions for wealthy clients, terminated parental rights without cause, pushed children into foster care on flimsy pretexts, always working with the same agencies, same doctors, same evaluators. How did? No one notice, Rebecca demanded. People did, Marcus said grimly. 3 social workers tried to report irregularities. All 3 were fired, their credibility attacked. A court clerk who questioned paperwork had her house mysteriously burned down. They protected their operation through intimidation. Rebecca's phone buzzed with a text from Jenny. More nurses coming forward. 28 cases now identified at Riverside alone. Meeting with FBI tomorrow. The news coverage continued all day. Reporters camped outside Rebecca's house hoping for comments. She kept the curtains drawn, creating a safe cocoon for Elijah as his world transformed again. That evening, Agent Taylor returned with another agent. We need to move you both to a safe house, she announced. We've received credible threats. Too many powerful people are being implicated. Rebecca started to protest, but Marcus cut in. She's right. This goes beyond corrupt doctors and judges. There are wealthy families who paid hundreds of thousands to buy babies, politicians who took bribes to look the other way, corporate executives who helped launder the money. They're all at risk of exposure. Sarah helped them pack quickly while FBI agents swept the house for surveillance devices. They found 3. The Turners, Agent Taylor explained. They bugged all their kids' belongings before placement, standard procedure for them. Rebecca held Elijah's hand as they were escorted to an unmarked car. How long? Until we're sure you're both safe. We have a secluded location, round-the-clock security. You can continue coordinating with the task force from there. As they drove through darkened streets, Elijah clutched his photograph and the baby pictures Jenny had given them. Will Miss Jenny be safe? She's already in protective custody, Agent Taylor assured him, along with other witnesses who've come forward. The safe house was a comfortable lakeside cabin, isolated but well-equipped. Armed agents patrolled the perimeter while Rebecca and Elijah settled in. Think of it as a vacation, she told him, trying to keep things light for his sake. Just you and me, hiding out like superheroes in their secret base. He managed a small smile. Can we still help the other kids? Of course. That's what superheroes do. She pulled him close. And you know what makes you the bravest superhero? You spoke up. You told the truth. Because of you, other children will find their real families too. Later that night, unable to sleep, Rebecca sat on the cabin's porch while Elijah finally rested inside. Marcus had sent her more case files to review, dozens of stories just like theirs. Mothers told their babies were dead, children fed into a corrupt system, lives shattered by greed. Her phone lit up with a secure message from Sarah. Judge Harris talking, says operation goes back 30 years, thousands of cases nationwide, international connections too. Rebecca's hand shook as she replied, How many children? Still counting. FBI creating database to cross-reference hospital records, adoption papers, foster care placements, DNA testing being offered to any family with suspicious cases. The scope of it was overwhelming. Rebecca had thought finding Elijah was the end of their story. Instead, it was just the beginning of a much larger fight. A soft sound made her turn. Elijah stood in the doorway, blanket wrapped around his shoulders. Another bad dream? She asked. He shook his head. I heard you thinking too loud. Rebecca smiled despite everything. Too loud, huh? You're worried about the other kids. He came to sit beside her. The ones like me. Yes, she admitted. There are a lot of them. A lot of mothers missing their babies. Elijah was quiet for a moment. Then we have to help them all, he said simply, like Miss Jenny helped us. Rebecca pulled him onto her lap, marveling at his resilience. It won't be easy. Some people don't want the truth to come out. That's why we're superheroes, he reminded her. Superheroes don't give up. Over the next few days, Rebecca coordinated with the task force from their secure location. More arrests were made. More families came forward. The story grew bigger every hour. Jenny's evidence proved invaluable. Her meticulous records helped prosecutors build cases against doctors, nurses, agency workers, and corrupt officials. Other whistleblowers emerged, encouraged by her example. The Turners, now revealed as the Sullivans, began cooperating with authorities in exchange for leniency. They provided details about other fake foster parents, safe houses where stolen children were hidden, offshore accounts where millions in trafficking profits were stored. Sarah worked tirelessly to review cases, identify victims, and coordinate support services for traumatized families. The FBI's Special Victims Unit set up a hotline for tips and created a database to match missing children with suspicious adoptions. Through it all, Elijah remained Rebecca's anchor. His strength amazed her. The way he spoke to investigators, helped identify other children from the Turners' home, offered comfort to newly discovered victims. You're getting better at being a mom, he told her one evening as they sat on the cabin's porch watching the sunset. Rebecca hugged him close. You're getting better at being a kid, she replied. I saw you playing with Agent Taylor's daughter today. Actually playing, not just sitting quietly. He nodded. I don't have to pretend anymore. Or be scared. No, you don't. She kissed the top of his head. And you know what? Neither do I. For years I pretended I was okay, that I'd moved on from losing you. But I never did. Because moms and kids belong together, he said with 8-year-old wisdom, even when bad people try to keep them apart. Rebecca thought of all the other mothers out there, still believing their babies were dead. All the other children lost in the system, carrying memories they'd been told to forget. "We'll find them," she promised, speaking to all those separated families. "We'll bring them home." The sun set over the lake, painting the sky in brilliant colors. Mother and son sat together, safe in their temporary sanctuary, while across the country a movement for justice gathered strength. The truth was finally coming to light, and no amount of money or power could stop it now. The morning sun streamed through the safe house windows as Rebecca stared at the envelope in her hands. Though the preliminary DNA test had already confirmed what her heart knew, this was the official comprehensive report, the one that would stand up in court and cement her legal claim to Elijah. "Do you want me to open it?" Sarah Martinez asked gently. She had driven 3 hours to deliver the results personally, refusing to trust them to any messenger. Rebecca shook her head, breaking the seal with trembling fingers. The medical jargon blurred before her eyes until she found the conclusion. 99.9999% probability of maternal relationship confirmed. "It's real," she whispered. "It's really real." "Of course it's real." Elijah's voice came from the doorway. He stood there in his pajamas, hair tousled from sleep. "We already knew that, Mommy." The simple confidence in his voice made Rebecca's heart swell. She opened her arms and he came to her, fitting perfectly against her side as she showed him the paper. "See? Science agrees with your heart." Agent Taylor arrived shortly after, carrying fresh case files. "Dr. Wells gave us everything," she announced. "Names, dates, bank records, 30 years of trafficking operations. But there's something specific you need to see." She pulled out a hospital security photo dated the night of Elijah's birth. A nurse carrying a newborn down an empty corridor. This was Jennifer Kirkland trying to get photographic evidence she managed to hack into the security system that night. More photos followed. Dr. Wells speaking with a couple in expensive clothes, money changing hands, papers being signed. Then the most damning image. Elijah, clearly alive and healthy, being handed to the Richardsons while Rebecca lay unconscious in recovery. "They told me he was stillborn." Rebecca's voice shook with rage. "They didn't even let me see him. They had it down to a science," Agent Taylor explained. "They knew exactly how long the anesthesia would keep mothers unconscious. By the time you woke up, Elijah was already gone." Sarah reviewed her notes. The Richardsons paid $350,000 that night. The money was split between Dr. Wells, the hospital, administrator, and New Beginnings Family Services. "What happened to the Richardsons?" Rebecca asked. "Arrested this morning in Connecticut." Agent Taylor's satisfaction was evident. "They've been living under assumed names, but facial recognition. Caught them trying to board a flight to Switzerland." Elijah studied the photos carefully. "I remember her," he said suddenly, pointing to Mrs. Richardson. "She used to cry a lot and say I wasn't the baby she paid for." Rebecca pulled him closer, fighting back tears of fury. "You were perfect. They were the ones who were wrong." Marcus Chen arrived next, bringing news from the expanding investigation. "We've identified a pattern in the hospital records. They specifically targeted mothers who matched certain criteria. Educated, healthy, good genetic backgrounds. Then they'd look for wealthy couples wanting babies with similar characteristics." "Designer babies," Sarah said bitterly. "They were treating children like luxury goods." "The price varied based on the mother's background," Marcus continued. "They charged more for babies from mothers with advanced degrees, high IQs, or special talents." "Rebecca, they charged extra for Elijah because you were a judge." Rebecca felt sick. "How many other judges were involved?" "We've identified 7 so far, all working with New Beginnings and similar agencies. They'd help fast-track adoptions, terminate parental rights, keep investigations from going too deep." Agent Taylor pulled up more files on her laptop. "Judge Harris gave us names of other corrupt officials. prosecutors who buried evidence, police who looked the other way, politicians who blocked oversight legislation. The web keeps growing. Elijah listened to it all, his face serious. Is that why no one helped us before? Because the bad people were everywhere? Some people tried to help, Rebecca reminded him. Like Miss Jenny. But yes, the bad people had a lot of power. Until now. Jenny herself arrived that afternoon, escorted by FBI agents from her own safe location. Her face lit up when she saw Elijah. There's my brave boy. I hear you've been helping the investigators. Elijah ran to hug her. I told them about the basement at the Turner's house, and about the other kids. Thanks to Elijah's testimony, we've identified 6 more children who went through the Turner's home, Agent Taylor said. 3 have already been matched with their birth families through DNA testing. Jenny sat down, pulling more documents from her ever-present briefcase. I've been working with the FBI's forensic accountants. We've traced payments through offshore accounts, shell companies, hidden assets. The money trail goes back decades. Marcus whistled at the numbers. Billions of dollars. Private islands, luxury properties, political donations. All paid for with stolen children. Rebecca's judicial mind was already cataloging charges, building cases. We'll need special prosecutors, dedicated court resources. These cases will take years to untangle. The FBI is setting up a permanent task force, Agent Taylor confirmed. We're calling it Operation Lost Children. Dedicated agents, forensic accountants, victim support services. Everything needed to pursue these cases long-term. Sarah's phone buzzed with updates from her office. More families coming forward every day. The DNA database is getting hits constantly. We've already matched 15 mothers with children they were told had died. What happens to the bad parents? Elijah asked. The ones who bought babies? It was a complex question that had been debating among prosecutors. Agent Taylor answered carefully. Each case will be different. Some knew they were buying stolen babies. They'll face criminal charges. Others might have believed they were doing legal adoptions. We'll have to investigate each situation. The important thing, Rebecca added, is making sure children are safe and helping families heal. Jenny pulled out one last piece of evidence, a recorded conversation between Dr. Wells and the hospital administrator the night Elijah was born. Their casual discussion of pricing and logistics, their jokes about grieving mothers, made Rebecca's blood boil. I kept this recording for 8 years, Jenny said, waiting for the right moment, the right person to bring it to. When I saw Elijah recognize you in that courtroom, I knew it was time. The day wore on as more evidence was reviewed, more connections uncovered. Rebecca watched Elijah with Jenny, noting how he smiled more freely now, how the haunted look in his eyes was fading. She thought of all the other children still carrying that look, still separated from their real families. That evening, after the others had gone, Rebecca sat with Elijah on the safe house porch. The lake reflected the sunset in brilliant colors, creating a peaceful backdrop to their conversation. The DNA test says what we already knew, she told him. That I'm your mother, legally and forever. He nodded, unsurprised. I knew from your heart, remember? And your song. Our song, she corrected, humming a few bars of their lullaby. But the test means no one can ever take you away again. You're officially, legally mine. What about the other kids? He asked. Will they get tests too? Yes, the FBI is helping all the families get DNA testing. And thanks to you and Miss Jenny, they know what to look for now. All those fake papers and missing files. They can't hide the truth anymore. Elijah was quiet for a moment, thinking. Some kids might be scared, he said finally. Like I was. At first, scared to remember, scared to tell. Rebecca marveled at his insight. That's why your story is so important. You're showing them it's safe to remember, safe to speak up. You're helping them be brave. Like a superhero. His smile was sleepy but real. Exactly like a superhero. She pulled him closer as the sun sank below the horizon. Want to know a secret? You made me brave too. I was so scared to hope, to believe you could really be my son. But your courage gave me courage. He yawned, snuggling against her. That's what families do, right? Help each other be brave. Right. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at his simple wisdom. And now we get to help other families find their courage too. As Elijah drifted off to sleep in her arms, Rebecca thought about the days ahead. There would be trials, testimony, difficult questions to answer. The wealthy and powerful would fight back, trying to protect their secrets and their stolen children. But they had truth on their side now, and evidence that couldn't be buried. Jenny's careful documentation, the FBI's investigation, DNA science that could reunite families across decades. It was all coming together to expose decades of corruption and heal countless broken hearts. Her phone buzzed softly with a message from Agent Taylor. 3 more matches confirmed tonight. Mothers in Boston, Seattle, and Miami. Their children were taken the same way as Elijah. DNA confirms all 3. Reunions being arranged. Rebecca smiled through her tears, imagining other mothers getting the news she had received. The miraculous truth that their babies hadn't died, that hope and healing were possible. She thought of all the children like Elijah, carrying memories they'd been told to forget, finally being validated and believed. The night deepened around them as she held her sleeping son, their matching heartbeats a reminder of all they had lost and found again. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more families discovered, more truth unveiled. But tonight they were together, safe in the knowledge that their long separation was finally over. And somewhere in the growing darkness, other mothers lay awake, wondering about babies they'd been told were dead, children they'd never held. Soon they would know the truth. Soon they would hold their children again, thanks to a brave little boy who refused to forget, and a mother who never stopped loving him. The stars emerged one by one, witnesses to a story of loss and redemption that was bigger than any one family. In safe houses across the country, other children slept safely tonight, protected while justice slowly turned its wheels. Other mothers kept vigil, holding on to hope that had seemed impossible just days ago. Rebecca looked down at Elijah's peaceful face, seeing in it all the possibility of healing and redemption. They had found each other against impossible odds, exposed a criminal enterprise that had seemed untouchable, and given hope to countless other families torn apart by greed and corruption. The truth couldn't be hidden anymore. Justice was coming, slow but certain as the dawn, and in its wake would come healing, reunion, and the rebuilding of families shattered by decades of lies. The lake waters lapped softly at the shore, a gentle lullaby for mother and child finally reunited. Their story had opened the door for others, shining light into dark places where truth had been buried. Now, like the stars emerging in the night sky, other families would find their way back to each other, guided by love that never died, and hope that never faded. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new battles to fight, but tonight, in this peaceful moment, Rebecca held her son and gave thanks for miracles that proved stronger than corruption, and love that found its way home. 2 months had passed since the first arrests. Rebecca stood in her newly renovated home office, watching Elijah in the backyard through the window. He was playing with another child, a girl named Sophie, who had also been trafficked through New Beginnings. The two had formed an instant bond during family support group meetings. "They're good for each other," Sophie's mother Catherine said softly from the doorway. "They understand things other children don't." Rebecca nodded, noting how freely Elijah laughed now, how his movements had lost their cautious hesitation. "He's teaching me too," she admitted, "about healing, about starting over." The past months had been intense. After 6 weeks in the safe house, they had returned home to find their lives transformed. Rebecca had taken a leave of absence from the bench to focus on Elijah and assist with the expanding investigation. Their house had been completely redesigned. With Elijah's input, warm colors, soft lighting, spaces that felt safe and welcoming. Dr. Matthews says their play therapy sessions are making remarkable progress, Catherine commented, watching their children chase each other around the yard. Sophie's nightmares are less frequent now. Elijah too, Rebecca said, though he still likes to check that I'm real sometimes, especially at night. The doorbell rang, announcing the arrival of Sarah Martinez. The social worker had become a close friend through their shared mission of helping trafficking victims. She carried her ever-present files, but her face was bright with good news. 3 more matches confirmed through the DNA database, she announced. All children taken from mothers at Riverside Memorial. 2 were in foster care, 1 with an adoptive family who claims they didn't know. Rebecca led them to the kitchen where Jenny Kirkland was already waiting. The former nurse had moved nearby to continue working with the investigation, becoming an honorary grandmother to many of the recovered children. "How are the prosecutions going?" Catherine asked, accepting a cup of coffee. "Dr. Wells took a plea deal," Sarah reported. 25 years in federal prison in exchange for testimony against the hospital board and adoption agency directors. Judge Harris gets sentenced next week, looking at 15 to 20 years. Jenny pulled out her latest notes. The FBI has traced over $3 billion through the trafficking network. Properties being seized, accounts frozen. They're using the money to set up a victim compensation fund. Rebecca thought of the Richardsons, sitting in jail awaiting trial. They had offered to testify against others in the scheme, but prosecutors weren't interested in deals. The evidence against them was too strong, including Elijah's testimony about their abuse. "How many children have been identified so far?" Catherine asked. 212 confirmed cases, Sarah said. But that's just from 3 hospitals. The FBI thinks there could be thousands nationwide. Through the window, they could see Elijah showing Sophie his new treehouse, a gift from Rebecca that he insisted on sharing with other recovering children. His therapist said creating safe spaces and learning to share them was an important part of his healing. "The support groups are helping," Jenny observed. "Both the children's groups and the mothers' meetings. There's something powerful about being with others who understand," Rebecca agreed. The weekly gatherings had become a crucial part of their healing journey. Mothers shared their stories of loss and reunion, while children found friends who understood their unique experiences. They celebrated small victories together, first words spoken, first nights without nightmares, first genuine smiles. "Elijah's doing better in school," Rebecca shared. His new private school specialized in trauma-informed education. His teachers say he's starting to participate in class discussions, make friends. "Sophie too," Catherine smiled. "Yesterday," she raised her hand to answer a question. "First time since we found each other." The sound of children's laughter floated through the window. Elijah was teaching Sophie their special song, the lullaby that had helped him remember his mother. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes as Sophie's clear voice joined his. "He's helping her heal," Catherine whispered. "Just like he helped break open the whole investigation." Sarah nodded. "The FBI says Elijah's testimony was crucial. His memory of specific details, his ability to identify key players. It gave them the foundation they needed to build their cases." "He's still my little superhero," Rebecca said proudly. "But now he gets to be a child too." The transformation in Elijah over the past months amazed everyone who knew him. The silent, withdrawn boy from the courtroom had blossomed into a caring, creative child who used his experience to help others. He still had difficult moments, triggers that brought back painful memories, times when fear or anger overwhelmed him. But he was learning healthy ways to cope, supported by his mother's constant love and understanding. "The hardest cases are the older children," Sarah said, her face darkening. "Teenagers who grew up never knowing they were stolen. Some don't want to believe the truth about their adoptive families." We can't force healing, Jenny reminded them. Each child, each family has to find their own path. All we can do is offer support and resources. Rebecca thought of the family therapy sessions she and Elijah attended twice weekly. Their therapist helped them navigate their unique situation. A mother and child reunited after 8 years, both carrying different kinds of trauma. They were learning to communicate, to trust, to build new memories while honoring the pain of their separation. The prosecution wants Elijah to testify at the Richardsons' trial, Rebecca said quietly. I'm worried it's too much for him. What does he want? Catherine asked. He says he wants to help make sure they can't hurt any more kids. But I see how it affects him. Nightmares, anxiety attacks. I don't want him to sacrifice his healing for the case. Sarah touched her arm, gently. The prosecutors have his recorded testimony from the safe house. They can use that instead of putting him through a trial. The back door opened and Elijah bounded in, Sophie close behind. Both children were flushed with exercise and happiness. Mom, can we have cookies? I promised to show Sophie how to dunk them just right. Rebecca smiled at this normal childish request. Of course. Why don't you both help me get them ready? As the children washed their hands and helped arrange cookies on plates, Rebecca marveled at their resilience. They had survived unimaginable trauma, yet here they were, giggling over proper cookie dunking technique. Remember, Elijah instructed Sophie seriously, 3 seconds in the milk. Any longer and it gets too soggy. Sophie nodded, concentrating on her cookie with adorable intensity. Like this? Perfect. Elijah beamed at her success. Mom, Sophie's a natural cookie dunker. The adults exchanged emotional glances, recognizing the significance of this simple moment. These children were reclaiming their right to be children, one cookie at a time. Later that evening, after Sophie and Catherine had gone home, Rebecca sat with Elijah in their favorite spot on the porch swing. The setting sun painted the sky in peaceful colors as they shared their daily, grateful moments, a ritual suggested by their therapist. I'm grateful Sophie didn't get sad today, Elijah said thoughtfully. Sometimes when we play, she gets quiet and scared. But today she just had fun. Rebecca hugged him close. That's because you're such a good friend to her. You understand what she needs. Like Miss Jenny understood what I needed. He looked up at her with wise eyes. She helped me find you. Yes, exactly like that. Rebecca kissed the top of his head. Want to know what I'm grateful for today? I'm grateful for your laugh. Every time I hear it, my heart feels lighter. Elijah considered this. Even when I laugh because I put extra bubbles in the bath and they went everywhere, especially then. Rebecca tickled him gently, drawing out another of those precious laughs. Bubbles can be cleaned up. Your happiness is what matters. They sat quietly for a while, watching the stars emerge. Rebecca thought about how far they'd come since that day in the courtroom. Elijah was healing, growing, learning to trust. She was learning too, how to be both strong and vulnerable, how to help him feel secure while respecting his independence. Mom? Elijah's voice was sleepy. Do you think the other kids will find their moms too? Many of them already have, she reminded him. Thanks to brave people like you and Miss Jenny who told the truth. The FBI is working very hard to find all the families. Good. He yawned. Because moms and kids belong together, even if bad people try to keep them apart. Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes at his simple wisdom. Yes, they do. And no one will ever separate us again. That night, after Elijah was asleep, Rebecca sat in her office reviewing case files. The investigation had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. More hospitals were being investigated, more corrupt officials exposed, more families reunited. Her phone buzzed with a text from Agent Taylor. Major breakthrough in California case. Similar operation identified at 3 hospitals. Raids scheduled for tomorrow. Thought you'd want to know. Rebecca smiled grimly. The truth couldn't be hidden anymore. All across the country, justice was slowly but surely being served. Thanks to Elijah's courage and Jenny's evidence, a decades-long criminal enterprise was crumbling. She walked to Elijah's room, watching him sleep peacefully. His favorite stuffed lion, a gift from Sophie, was tucked under his arm. On his bedside table sat the worn photograph that had helped him find his way home. Tomorrow would bring more revelations, more families reunited, more healing and hope. But tonight, in this quiet moment, Rebecca simply gave thanks for the miracle of having her son back and for all the other miracles his bravery had set in motion. Outside, a gentle breeze carried the scent of blooming flowers through the window. Spring was coming, bringing new beginnings for families torn apart by greed and corruption. One by one, they would find their way back to each other, guided by love that never died and truth that couldn't be buried. Rebecca adjusted Elijah's blanket, humming their special lullaby. He smiled in his sleep, secure in the knowledge that he was home, he was loved, and he would never be alone again. The night deepened around them as justice continued its slow but steady march. In homes across the country, other mothers watched their recovered children sleep. Other families began their healing journeys, and at the heart of it all was a little boy who refused to forget, and a mother who never stopped loving him. Their story had opened the door for others, shining light into dark places where truth had been hidden. Now, like stars emerging in the night sky, other families would find their way back to each other, guided by hope that never faded and love that conquered all barriers. 1 year had passed since that fateful day in Courtroom 307. Rebecca stood at the podium in a packed conference hall, addressing the first National Convention of Families Reunited, the organization she had helped establish to support victims of child trafficking and advocate for systemic change. When my son stood up in that courtroom and said, "You're my mom," he did more than just find his way home, she began, her voice steady and strong. He started a movement that has exposed decades of corruption and reunited hundreds of families. Elijah sat in the front row between Jenny Kirkland and Sophie, now his closest friend. At 9 years old, he carried himself with quiet confidence. His earlier trauma transformed into determination to help others heal. Today, we celebrate not just reunions, but justice, Rebecca continued. Over 300 perpetrators have been convicted. 42 corrupt officials are serving prison terms. 8 hospitals have been held accountable. But most importantly, 573 children have found their way back to their real families. The audience, filled with reunited families, advocates, and law enforcement officials, burst into applause. Rebecca saw tears on many faces, knowing each person there carried their own story of loss and redemption. The FBI's Operation Lost Children has become a permanent task force, she announced. Their DNA database continues to make matches every week. The Victim Compensation Fund has distributed over $500 million to help families rebuild their lives, but our work isn't done. In the year since the investigation began, the true scope of the trafficking operation had become clear. Multiple networks across the country had stolen thousands of babies over 3 decades, selling them to wealthy families and hiding the evidence through corrupt officials and falsified documents. Dr. Wells will spend the next 25 years in federal prison, Rebecca noted. Judge Harris received 20 years. The Richardsons and 19 other couples who knowingly purchased stolen children are serving sentences ranging from 10 to 15 years. But prison terms alone cannot heal the trauma these criminals caused. She gestured to the conference hall's side screens, where photos showed support group meetings, therapy sessions, and family reunions. Real healing happens in moments like these. When children learn to trust again. When mothers and fathers rebuild bonds that were brutally severed. When families help each other overcome the pain of separation. The convention featured workshops on trauma recovery, legal advocacy, and family reunification. Mental health professionals shared strategies for helping children process their experiences. Law enforcement officials discussed preventing future trafficking operations. But the most powerful sessions were the simple sharing circles where families told their stories. My son taught me that love leaves traces even trauma cannot erase, Rebecca continued. He remembered my heartbeat, my lullaby, the sound of my voice. Other children have reported similar memories, connections that survived years of separation, and lies. She looked at Elijah, who smiled encouragingly. He had become an inspiration to other recovered children, showing them it was possible to heal and thrive. His friendship with Sophie had evolved into a kind of informal peer support network, with both children helping newcomers adjust to reunification. The truth about what happened to our families was buried under decades of corruption, Rebecca said. But truth has a way of rising to the surface. One child's courage, one nurse's dedication to justice, one mother's refusal to stop hoping. These small acts of bravery combined to expose crimes that seemed untouchable. Jenny wiped away tears as Rebecca acknowledged her role in breaking the case. The former nurse had become the heart of their support community, offering wisdom and comfort to traumatized families. Her meticulous evidence had helped convict dozens of perpetrators. Today I'm announcing the launch of our new advocacy initiative, Rebecca revealed. The Never Again Project will work to strengthen oversight of adoption agencies, increase criminal penalties for child trafficking, and establish nationwide protocols to prevent baby theft in hospitals. The project, funded by seized assets from the trafficking networks, would also provide scholarships for recovered children and support services for reunited families. Rebecca had resigned from the bench to lead these advocacy efforts full-time, knowing her judicial experience would lend weight to their calls for reform. But the most important announcement today is about hope, she continued. Hope that sustained us through years of separation. Hope that led children to keep searching for their real families. Hope that gave mothers the strength to keep believing. The side screens showed more photos. Elijah and Rebecca on their first real vacation together. Sophie's family celebrating her recovery milestones. Support group gatherings where healing happened through shared understanding. Each image represented a small victory over trauma. 1 year ago, my son and I found each other against impossible odds, Rebecca said. Today we stand here surrounded by hundreds of other families who have experienced similar miracles. Each reunion represents a triumph of love over greed, truth over corruption, justice over crime. She invited Elijah to join her at the podium. He walked up confidently, taking her hand. My son was called difficult and troubled by people who wanted to hide the truth about his past. Today, he's a straight-A student who helps other kids heal from trauma. He shows us that with proper support and understanding, recovery is possible. Elijah spoke into the microphone, his voice clear and strong. When I found my mom, I thought it was just our miracle. But then we learned about other kids like me, other moms who lost their babies. Now we help them find each other too. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Rebecca saw Catherine and Sophie crying happy tears, Jenny beaming with grandmother-like pride, Sarah Martinez nodding in professional satisfaction. Each had played a crucial role in the past year's transformations. After the speech, families gathered for a celebration dinner. Children who had once been withdrawn and fearful now played together, sharing stories and strength. Mothers who had believed their babies were dead now held them close, making up for lost years with love. You've created something amazing, Jenny told Rebecca as they watched Elijah organize a game with other kids. This community, this movement, it's changing lives. We all created it together, Rebecca corrected. Your evidence, Sarah's dedication, Catherine's support groups, Agent Taylor's investigation, even the children help each other heal. The FBI's Special Task Force had expanded to offices nationwide. Agent Taylor, now its director, credited Elijah's case with revolutionizing how law enforcement approached child trafficking investigations. His story showed us what to look for, she had explained. The falsified death certificates, the corrupt officials, the pattern of moving children through multiple foster homes to hide their origins. Now we know how to trace these cases and build solid prosecutions. The evening ended with a candlelight ceremony, honoring families still searching for each other. Rebecca held Elijah close as they lit their candle, remembering their own journey from loss to reunion. "Do you think we'll find all the stolen kids?" he asked softly. "We'll never stop trying," she promised. "Every family deserves the miracle we found." Later that night, in their hotel room, Rebecca watched Elijah sleep peacefully. The haunted look that had once dominated his face was gone, replaced by the natural calm of a secure, loved child. His recovery wasn't perfect. He still had occasional nightmares and anxiety triggers, but he had learned healthy ways to cope. Her phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "2 more matches confirmed today. DNA results just came in. Another miracle. In the making." Rebecca smiled, remembering how each reunion felt like watching their own story unfold again. The disbelief, the joy, the overwhelming emotion of finding someone you thought was lost forever. The convention would continue for 3 more days, offering workshops, counseling sessions, and networking opportunities. But its real value lay in the connections formed between families who understood each other's experiences. She thought about how far they'd come in 1 year. Elijah had gone from a silent, traumatized child to a confident boy who helped others heal. She had transformed from a grieving mother to an advocate leading a national movement for change. The criminal enterprise that had stolen so many babies was being dismantled piece by piece. Dr. Wells's testimony had led to investigations of similar operations in other states. Judge Harris's conviction had prompted reviews of thousands of suspicious adoptions. But the most important changes were the personal ones: children learning to trust and love again, mothers healing from years of false grief, families rebuilding bonds that had been brutally severed. Elijah stirred in his sleep, mumbling their special lullaby. Rebecca hummed along softly, marveling at how this simple song had helped him remember her through years of separation. Love had left traces that even trauma couldn't erase. The next morning, they would return to the convention to continue their work. More families would share their stories. More children would find hope in Elijah's example. More mothers would learn they weren't alone in their journey of healing. The Never Again project would grow, advocating for changes to prevent future trafficking operations. The FBI's task force would make more matches through their DNA database. Support groups would welcome new families beginning their reunion journeys. But for now, in this quiet moment, Rebecca simply watched her son sleep and gave thanks for the miracle that had brought them back together. Their story had opened the door for others, showing that justice was possible and healing could happen. Outside the hotel window, the city lights twinkled like stars. Somewhere out there, other families were still searching for each other. But, thanks to one boy's courage and one mother's love, they now had hope of finding their way home. The future stretched ahead, full of possibility. Rebecca thought of all they had accomplished in 1 year. Hundreds of families reunited, criminals brought to justice, laws changed to protect children. But she knew their work wasn't finished. As long as there were stolen children to find, traumatized, families to support, and systemic changes to advocate for, they would continue their mission. The movement that began in Courtroom 307 had grown into a powerful force for healing and justice. Elijah had shown them all that miracles were possible. His simple words, "You're my mom," had started a revolution of truth and reunion. Now, other children were finding their voices, other mothers were reclaiming their stolen babies, other families were healing together. The night deepened as Rebecca finally settled into bed, grateful for every moment with her son. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities, but tonight, She celebrated how far they'd come and held on to hope for all the families still searching for their miracles. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe to hear more tales of justice, courage, and love that refuses to be silenced. Share it with someone who needs to believe in miracles. Because maybe, just maybe, the next story we tell will help another lost child find their way home. See you in the next video, where more extraordinary true stories await.